Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Gnomebot Studios. I'm back again with another Grit Fantasy RPG video. Today's topic, hazards and conditions. Now, hazards and conditions are mostly physical challenges that characters may face during a session of Grit. It's a brief set of rules that I put in the GM section of the book to help GMs sort of deal with these specific situations if they arise. There was a moment when I was writing the book that I was on the fence about putting these in at all, but eventually came to realize that it's something that should be in the book, if at the very least is a starting point for you to think about these things as a GM. I don't like the idea of having to rules reference during the games, and that's why I was hesitant. But I think it's a good idea to kind of establish some of these things. Now, they only ended up being a full 6x9 page, so I think there's like 15 items, and they're only 2 lines each. So they're pretty streamlined, but I did start out with probably twice as many. So these are going to be just the most common ones that I thought would come up. So like all the other videos I've been doing here, I'm going to have the rule book on the left-hand side, and we are going to go into the GM's section and get right to the hazards and conditions page, which is page 46 of the book. Okay, I want to say a couple things before I start into these. One is that these are not hard rules. Like, these are just a starting point for you. So if you feel they need to be tweaked or adjusted in any way, by all means, do that. Do it any way that makes you more comfortable. Maybe you have some homebrew rules that you've already figured out for other games that you could just plug in. It's all up to you. The idea is not to have to look at the book a lot, and I think once you get familiar with the Grit system, you're not going to really have to look at this, which is, part of the premise of the game, right? Another thing I wanted to bring up too is that there are a lot of monsters in the book that have features, basically abilities, that deal with these things. And so when you have that situation where there's a monster that has, like, say, a poison ability, the monster abilities are going to supersede anything that's on this list, okay? So just go with the monster ability stuff first, and don't bother looking at this guide here that I have on this page. Okay, this is, again, just a basic structure framework for you to start from. And actually, after kind of looking through this for this video, there are going to be a few things I'm going to maybe minimize or tweak slightly for the Grit Galaxies game that I am developing currently. And there might be some that I take out and some that I put in because of the setting. Okay. But anyway, let's get started here. So the first one is acid. So super common thing. Could be traps, could be monsters, who knows, but anyway, it says destroys a random gear item and deals 1 to 2 unsoakable fixed damage for D4 rounds. So to me, I would like to add and or to that. So you could have this thing like wreck a gear item when it lands on the characters, or deals 1 to 2 damage for a set number of rounds, or a rolled number of rounds. Okay, it could be both, but it's up to you how you want to do this. But this gives you an idea how this kind of work. And also there's the opportunity for the characters to kind of like jump in some water or roll in some dirt or try to get the acid off to like reduce the damage that they're taking. Okay. Super simple on that. And actually there's a monster I wanted to show you that has something similar to this. And it's one I brought up before, I think, the slime. So the third feature it has is called Corrosive Touch. So it deals D4 damage to the contacted target, destroying one gear item each round until contact is broken. So in the case of the slime, you'd go with that instead of what the rulebook says in hazards and conditions. Again, hazards and conditions are just a starting point. Okay, we'll get into bleeding. This doesn't come up a lot in the games. There are some artifacts that have this, not many. And there are some monsters that have this ability as well. Okay, so bleeding deals 1 to 4 unsoakable fixed damage to the target for D4 rounds after the initial attack. So the attack happens, that damage is dealt, and then additional amount of damage is dealt over D4 rounds. So it's up to the GM to define how much damage is dealt. So it could be just 1 per round, and I'd be conservative on that. If you put 4 unsoakable damage, that can kill a character in like 3 rounds. So you want them to feel it, but you don't want them to like die because of that, if you can kind of help it, you know. So yeah, just be a little more conservative, I would say. And then there's a monster that has that as well, and that is the Troll. And we're going to go to the Troll, and they have their second feature. It's called Ripping Bite. So melee attack that deals an extra 2 bleed damage for D4 rounds. Okay, pretty nasty. But that is an example of bleeding. Okay, blindness. Until the end of its duration, all static rolls using sight are hard. So duration would be given if it's some kind of item. Usually it's an item or a monster ability feature. Opposed rolls made by the blinded target are reduced by half, rounded up. That's one I'd probably tweak a little bit, but just an idea. It gives you an idea of how that could be used. I would say if damage was dealt, it would be reduced by half, rounded up, not the actual roll itself. In hindsight, you kind of see these things as a designer, but you can't catch everything and change everything. And ideas change over time, right? Anyway, explosions are another thing. There are like little bombs and things you can get. So explosions can be a thing. There are maybe a couple monsters that have something similar to this. So all targets within an area of effect fall prone and take straight damage rolled by the GM. That means straight damage is just like a D4 die, D6, D8, D10. It's up to the GM. Sacrifice shields negate half damage, rounded up. So shields can be sacrificed to negate one attack, and this you could sacrifice it to negate half. The idea is that you're being enveloped in this explosion. Okay, next one, falling. So this is another one, be a little conservative maybe, because falling damage is not fun, really. It's always kind of cool to have that in your games as kind of a risk thing. But you don't want to like outright kill characters just from falling unless it's some kind of dramatic thing that's happening. So falling in melee height, which is not very far, there's just no damage taken from that. Short damage, D4 damage, or short distance, D4 damage, long distance, D8. See, I just kind of doubled it. That could easily become D4 or D6. This also causes the victim to become prone. There's prone is further down the list here. So you could also do like fixed damage as well. So like if you wanted to just do, let's say, a short fall would be 2 and long would be 4, or 1 and 2, something like that. That would work as well, and not be as brutal for the characters. Okay, next one is falling objects. So let's say you have you're in some kind of crypt and the ceiling is not in good shape, and there's, in the battle, these things are falling down on the characters, maybe bricks and stuff. So this would affect an area. So it could be like a melee or short range or long range area, radius basically. So characters would make a prowess roll to avoid it. Otherwise, damage is taken. So that's, again, another straight die roll. So it could be a D4, D6, or D8. You could also do fixed damage. So 1, 2, or 3 damage, something like that. Super easy. And you're going to see a pattern here where a lot of these things just kind of have the same structure. You could apply it to everything, right? So on the fly, once you get these things in your head, like on the fly stuff is easy to kind of do. Fear is one thing that is not physical, but some creatures have stuff like that. I think the ghost might. But anyway, it's like a mind attack, basically. So can be projected within a set radius. So like it kind of goes out in a like short ranged radius, or a ranged attack, like it's focusing on one character and just like one line of sight character. Characters must succeed a valor roll to avoid taking unsoakable damage. So that damage is up to you. It could be that this monster does this fear attack and it's an opposed roll. So that in that case, it'd be just like a weapon. The difference would be the damage dealt. So if the attacking monster does more or rolls higher than the character, the difference is given to the character and it's unsoakable, because armor will not protect you from a fear attack. Excuse me while I have a little bit of coffee here. Can't let it get cold, otherwise fear will set in. Anyway, fire is the next one. So let's say you have these catapults that are launching these big projected fireballs over the wall. It falls down and splashes flame upon the character. That would be like a set radius, but you can also do like a projected line. Or wait, no, that's fear. After the initial attack, like, this fireball falls down, boom, explodes. The target is dealt 1 through 4 fixed damage for D4 rounds. So as a GM, you decide 1 through 4 for D4 rounds, unless the fire is extinguished. So they could, roll on the ground, take an action to do that, or a movement if you'd like. It's all up to you. Armor and shields only soak the initial attack. So whatever if that fireball thing went over the wall and like smashed into them, they would take damage from an initial attack, and then the fire would be on them and dealing that damage for D4 rounds. That makes sense. Okay, another one that's not really physical is intimidation. I probably should be highlighting these, but anyway. Intimidation is next, and what that does is it's an opposed command roll that's made against the target's valor. Okay, so there's 2 dice rolled to get, they roll against each other. If the difference exceeds the target's current grit, it will comply or flee. Okay, so if you try to intimidate a little mook that only has 1 grit, and it will be easy to overpower them with intimidation. All you have to do is roll higher than their roll, their valor roll. In the case of a monster, they just have a universal aspect value to add to their roll. Pretty easy to kind of intimidate a mook. But if you're facing some boss monster that has like +3 universal aspect value and a lot of grit, it may be more tricky. Maybe once that monster is kind of beaten down and has less grit, then it may comply or flee. So it kind of balances that out. So you can't just characters can't just walk in up to the boss monster, intimidate them, and they're just defeated instantly. Unless some kind of artifact, changes that. But this kind of balances that out. Okay. All right, next one, pretty simple. Target knockback. And there's a number of artifacts that have this, has a kind of ability. The target is thrown a short distance in the direction of the attack and immediately falls prone. So you got this giant warhammer, boom, hits the target. They get thrown a short distance. And if you wanted to, if they went against a wall, you could add damage to that, maybe a couple points of grit. It's up to you. And then they immediately fall prone. Gets prone in real shortly here. Next one is poison, which is common. There's a lot of creatures with that. Target must succeed a static valor roll, or the poison's effects are applied and repeated for D4 rounds. The GM decides the difficulty of the roll, and usually that will be average. So they have to beat a 6. Giant Spider has this. I'm going to go to that and show you. Okay, so their third feature, Poison Fangs. It's a melee attack. In addition to damage from the bite, victims must succeed a hard valor roll or take 1 damage for D4 rounds. Okay, it just adds damage that is ongoing for that many rounds. Pretty simple. And that's probably on par with a lot of other RPGs out there. Some kind of ongoing effect. All right, prone is next. So what happens with prone is you become put in this vulnerable fallen position. So you're laying flat on the ground or face first, who knows. Recovering from prone takes a short move. Dealing or damage dealt from a prone attack is halved. So if you're on the ground in some kind of prone position and you're fighting still, you're going to do less damage that way. And attacking a prone target is easy. So it's the same as being kind of flanked, really. So one thing that you could tweak with this to make it a little easier is taking out the recovering from the prone thing. You could just make that like a free action, or just as part of their normal turn or move, right? Just that when they're down there, they're going to do a little bit less damage and are going to be easier to attack. Okay. There's a few items that will put characters in a prone position, or targets rather. All right, getting close to the end here. Stun is the next one. So target must succeed a static valor roll or become immediately immobilized and lose their next turn. Okay, it's their next turn. They can't do anything, basically. You could, I think there's some items or monster abilities that you bypass the valor roll and it just happens. Okay, so it's up to you and how you want to kind of roll with that. But the key is that you lose your next turn. And I would not add extra turns to that, because when you start getting into multiple turns where characters can't do anything, or even monsters, it's not that fun. So, err on the side of fun. Don't, stun over and over and over again. If you do it once, players are going to be like, whoa, this is crazy, can't do anything, and they get attacked. So, put it in there sparingly. Don't stretch it out, and you'll be fine. So the GM would decide the difficulty of the roll if you do have a valor roll that you add to this. Usually that would be average. All right, suffocation. So if you're like drowning, choking, smothering, yada, 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 unable to breathe deals D4 unsoakable damage each round the target is affected. Okay. If you wanted to add some more complication to that, you could maybe add in a Valor roll, and like maybe it only does half damage, or maybe it does no damage if they make the roll. Say they're like holding their breath to get, through a water-filled tunnel. Maybe they make Valor rolls to get across. If they fail it, then they take the damage. It could be something you do. You don't have to do a die roll. You could also do fixed damage, which could be 1 or 2 or 3 per round. So it's up to you. And then the last one, Swallowed Whole. Now there's a couple monsters that actually do this, where they're going to bite you and swallow you whole in one chomp. So that is a thing. Not super common, but it could happen. So the target takes D6 unsoakable damage each round unless the creature is killed or forced to expel them. Again, you could tweak the damage, but unsoakable it makes sense. Armor is not going to protect you from being compressed inside of a monster's belly with stomach acids and all kinds of stuff. You're just going to get dead quick. All attempted actions within that space or confined to that stomach are going to be absurd. Okay. If you want to make it easier, you can make it hard, but I wouldn't make it average or easy. Just because you're, not able to really move that much in there. Okay. So that is the list of hazards and conditions. This is not a complete list. I'm sure there's a million other things that could happen, but this is just some common ones to give you an idea how these things work. And I hope you don't, have to reference this a lot. It's just an idea. And like I said, there's a lot of monster features and abilities that kind of incorporate these things. So you're not going to have to look into this section. You'll just be looking at the monster stuff. Okay. And once you get familiar with these things, it's going to be easy to just on the fly make this stuff happen. And you're not getting tested on this stuff. You can just make it up on the fly and it's fine, as long as you follow the common sense rules. Just make it fun, make it challenging but fun. So that is all that I wanted to say about hazards and conditions. If you have any ideas, comments about this, I'd be happy to hear them in the comments below. Also, if you have not seen Grit Fantasy RPG, check it out on DriveThruRPG. I'll also put a link there. And I just want to say thanks for stopping in and watching this video and checking this out. And I hope everything is well for you. Hope you're out there gaming, and roll those dice.